I thought Mother's Day would be different this year. I was wrong. My name is Margaret Wilson, and I'm 68 years old. For the past 3 years, I've been living what I thought was a beautiful chapter of my life, being the grandmother who helps, the mother-in-law who cares, the woman who makes everything possible for her family. But sometimes, the people you love most are the ones who hurt you deepest. It started 3 years ago when my son David called me, his voice tight with stress. "Mom, we found the perfect house. It's everything Ashley's dreamed of. 3 bedrooms, a yard for Katie, in the school district we want, but we're short on the down payment." I remember sitting in my living room looking at the framed photo of my late husband Robert on the mantel. He'd worked 2 jobs for 30 years to build our nest egg. "How much do you need, sweetheart?" $80,000, Mom. I know it's a lot, but I'll write the check tomorrow. The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Then David's voice, thick with emotion. "Mom, I don't know what to say. Say you'll be happy there. That's all I need." The next morning, I drove to their cramped apartment with that check in my purse. Ashley opened the door, her eyes red from what I assumed were tears of joy. When I handed her the check, she threw her arms around me. "Mom, you're literally saving our family. Katie's going to have her own room and we'll finally have space to breathe. I promise we'll pay you back every penny." I hugged her tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling needed and loved. "This isn't a loan, sweetheart. This is a gift, a grandmother's gift to her family." Ashley pulled back, tears streaming down her face. "I don't deserve you." Looking back now, those words feel like prophecy. The house was beautiful, a colonial with white shutters and a wraparound porch that reminded me of the home Robert and I had dreamed of expanding into before his heart attack took those dreams away. Katie, my 7-year-old granddaughter, squealed with delight as she ran through the empty rooms, her footsteps echoing off hardwood floors. "Grandma, look! My room has 2 windows!" She pressed her little nose against the glass, already planning where her dollhouse would go. I spent the next 3 years making myself indispensable. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I'd drive the 20 minutes to their house to watch Katie while Ashley worked late at the dental office. I'd arrive with groceries, organic vegetables that Ashley preferred but couldn't always afford, Katie's favorite strawberry yogurt, ingredients for the homemade meals I'd prepare while they were busy. My days revolved around their schedule. Katie's school pickup at 3:15 when Ashley got stuck in procedures, emergency babysitting when David's construction job required overtime, Sunday dinners that I'd cook and serve, watching my family laugh around a table in the house my money had made possible. I kept their refrigerator stocked, their laundry folded, their lives running smoothly. When Katie had nightmares, she'd call me and I'd drive over at midnight to sit by her bed until she fell back asleep. When Ashley caught the flu last winter, I took a week off from my part-time job at the library to nurse her back to health. "What would we do without you, Mom?" David would say, kissing my cheek as I loaded their dishwasher after another family dinner. I lived for those words. I lived for feeling essential, needed, loved. But there were signs I chose to ignore. The way Ashley's smile sometimes didn't reach her eyes when I'd suggest family activities. How she'd stiffen slightly when I'd mention redecorating choices for our house. The increasing frequency of David's apologetic phone calls. "Mom, Ashley's really tired tonight. Maybe skip dinner this Sunday?" I told myself it was natural. Young families need space. New mothers get overwhelmed. I was reading too much into normal stress. What I didn't know was that every month when David and Ashley struggled to make their mortgage payment, I'd been quietly covering the difference. Their payment was $3,200 monthly. Between David's inconsistent construction income and Ashley's part-time dental hygienist salary, they could reliably cover about $2,000. So every month, without them asking, I'd transfer $1,200 to their account. $43,200 over 3 years. Beyond that initial $80,000 down payment. I never mentioned it. I never asked for acknowledgement. I simply couldn't bear the thought of my granddaughter losing her home because of money. Money I had. Family time was what felt precious and finite. Mother's Day morning arrived with the kind of spring sunshine that makes everything seem possible. I'd spent the previous evening wrapping Katie's gift, a handmade scrapbook filled with photos of our adventures together. Each page told a story. Katie's first steps in my living room, our Saturday morning pancake tradition, the time we built a blanket fort that took up my entire den. I'd written little notes beside each photo in my careful script. Katie, age 5, teaching Grandma to make friendship bracelets. Our trip to the zoo where Katie named every animal. The day Katie said she wanted to be just like Grandma when she grows up. I drove to their house with butterflies in my stomach, the wrapped scrapbook on my passenger seat. Ashley had mentioned that her mother was driving up from Tennessee for Mother's Day dinner, the first time we'd all celebrate together. I'd offered to bring the dessert, a triple-layer chocolate cake that was Katie's favorite. The driveway was full when I arrived. Ashley's mother's silver Lexus, David's truck, and a car I didn't recognize. I parked on the street, gathering my purse and Katie's gift, smoothing my dress, the blue one David had complimented at Easter. The front door was unlocked, voices and laughter spilling out as I stepped inside. The dining room table was set beautifully. Ashley's good china, the crystal glasses that had been a wedding gift, fresh flowers in the centerpiece I'd given them last Christmas. But something was wrong. I counted the place settings twice. 6 chairs around the table, but only 5 plates, 5 sets of silverware, 5 wine glasses. "Grandma!" Katie launched herself into my arms, her dark curls bouncing. "You came. Look what I made you." She thrust a construction paper card into my hands, decorated with crayon hearts and glitter. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." I kissed the top of her head, that familiar scent of baby shampoo and innocence. "I have something for you, too." Ashley appeared from the kitchen, wearing the dress I'd bought her for her birthday, navy blue with tiny white flowers. Behind her was a woman who looked like an older version of Ashley, all sharp cheekbones and careful makeup. "Margaret." Ashley's smile seemed strained. "You remember my mother, Linda." Linda extended a manicured hand. "Of course, the grandmother who helped so much." Her tone was perfectly polite and somehow condescending. "I brought Katie's gift," I said, holding up the wrapped scrapbook, "and the chocolate cake is in the car." "Oh." Ashley exchanged a glance with Linda. "Actually, Mom brought dessert, too. We might be a bit crowded." I looked again at the table setting, confusion creeping in. "Honey, I think you forgot my chair. There are only 5 place settings." "No importas." The laughter from the living room, David's voice, a man I didn't recognize, Linda's sharp giggle, seemed to fade as Ashley's expression grew uncomfortable. "Actually, Margaret, we decided to keep it small this year. Just immediate family, you know." The words hit me like a physical blow. Just immediate family. After 3 years of believing I was immediate family, of building my life around their needs, of considering their house, partially, my home, I don't understand. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Ashley's mother stepped closer to her daughter, a subtle claiming of territory. Maybe it's time Margaret understood that space is important for a nuclear family. Katie tugged on my dress. "Grandma, aren't you staying for dinner? I made you a card." Ashley knelt down to Katie's level. "Grandma has other plans today, sweetie. She'll visit another time." I stood there holding my granddaughter's handmade card and the scrapbook I'd spent weeks creating, feeling like an intruder in a house I'd helped them buy. The rational part of my mind said to leave gracefully, to preserve whatever dignity remained, but I needed to put the cake in the refrigerator. I needed a moment to process what was happening. "I'll just put the dessert away and say hello to David," I managed. In the kitchen, I could hear Ashley on her phone, her voice carrying clearly through the thin walls. She was talking to someone, her tone animated and relieved. No, it's going perfectly. She got the hint. Sometimes you just have to be direct with people who don't understand boundaries. A pause, then a laugh. I know, right? The real gift will be when that witch ends up in a nursing home. Then maybe David and I can finally have our lives back. Oh, My hands were shaking as I gripped the edge of their granite countertop, the one I'd helped them choose when we'd renovated the kitchen last year. Which? After everything I'd done, everything I'd given, every sacrifice I'd made to ensure their happiness and stability, I stood frozen in their kitchen, surrounded by appliances I'd helped pay for, looking at family photos that included me in happier times, listening to my daughter-in-law describe the mother of her husband as a burden to be discarded. Katie appeared in the doorway, her little face concerned. "Grandma, why are you crying?" I knelt down and pulled her into my arms, breathing in her sweetness one more time. "Sometimes grown-ups get sad, baby girl, but it's not your fault, okay? Grandma loves you more than all the stars in the sky. Are you sure you can't stay? I made macaroni art for you." "I'll see it next time, sweetheart." The lie tasted bitter, but Katie didn't need to understand adult cruelty yet. I placed the scrapbook on the counter next to the cake, took one last look at the dining room where my absence was planned and celebrated, and walked out the front door. David was on the porch with a man I assumed was Linda's husband, both holding beers and talking about sports. He looked up as I passed. "Mom, you're leaving already?" "Your wife explained that I'm not immediate family, David. I don't want to intrude on your celebration." His face went pale, but before he could respond, I was walking down the driveway toward my car. Behind me, I heard Ashley's voice calling out cheerfully, "Drive safe, Margaret!" I drove home through streets blurred by tears, past playgrounds where I'd pushed Katie on swings, past the ice cream shop where we'd shared dozens of Sundays, past the library where I'd checked out books to read to her at bedtime. At home, I sat in my empty kitchen and opened Katie's card. Inside, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, "Happy Mother's Day, Grandma. You are the best grandma in the world. I love you more than chocolate chips." For 3 days, my phone stayed silent. No calls to apologize, no texts to explain, no requests for my usual Tuesday babysitting. I drove by Katie's school at pickup time on Tuesday, watching from across the street as Ashley collected her daughter. The routine I'd handled every week for 3 years suddenly managed perfectly well without me. I found myself checking my bank account obsessively, looking at the automatic transfer I'd set up 3 years ago. Every month, like clockwork, $1,200 moved from my savings to their checking account. A mother's love quantified and automated. They'd called me a witch, planned my exile to a nursing home, celebrated my absence from their table. But they'd never mentioned stopping my monthly contribution to their mortgage. Looking at my bank statements, I realized something that made my chest tight with a mixture of heartbreak and clarity. I hadn't just bought them a house. For 3 years, I'd been paying for the privilege of my own disrespect. $43,200 in silent support, beyond the $80,000 down payment. $123,200 total, more than twice what Robert and I had paid for our first home. I'd funded my own heartbreak, subsidized my own rejection, paid monthly installments on my grandson's future therapy bills when he eventually realized what kind of people his parents really were. Saturday night, I sat in my living room looking at wedding photos. David and Ashley's wedding, where I'd walked Ashley down the aisle because her father had abandoned the family when she was 12. I'd been honored to stand in for the man who'd failed her, never imagining I'd eventually be discarded just as easily. There was Ashley in her white dress, radiant and grateful, whispering, "Thank you for being the mother I always needed," as we approached the altar. There was the hospital photo taken the day Katie was born. Ashley, exhausted and beautiful, holding her newborn daughter while I stood beside the bed, tears of joy streaming down my face. "She has your eyes, Mom," Ashley had said. "I hope she grows up to be just like you." There was the house closing photo, all of us grinning beside the sold sign, my check having made their dream possible. In every photo, Ashley looked at me with love, respect, genuine gratitude. When had that changed? When had I become a burden instead of a blessing? When had my presence shifted from welcome to intrusive? Or had I been fooling myself all along? Had 3 years of gratitude been performed for the woman who was financing their lifestyle? Sunday morning, I made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. I called the bank. I need to cancel an automatic transfer, I told the customer service representative. Account ending in 456 Let me pull that up for you, Mrs. Wilson. I see a monthly transfer of $1,200 that's been ongoing for... Typing sounds. 36 months. Are you sure you want to cancel this? It looks like it might be for a mortgage payment. I understand completely what it's for, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Please cancel it effective immediately. Done. Is there anything else I can help you with today? No, thank you. That's everything. I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of my house paid for in full, where no one could call me a witch or plan my exile. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't worried about anyone else's mortgage payment, anyone else's problems, anyone else's happiness. I was 73 years old, and I was finally going to find out what it felt like to live for myself. The real gift, I realized, wasn't going to be my departure to a nursing home. The real gift was going to be watching them learn to stand on their own 2 feet. I spent Monday morning in my attic, something I hadn't done in years. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through the small window as I pulled down boxes of old photographs, each one a time capsule of a life I'd almost forgotten I'd lived. The first box contained photos from Robert's and my early marriage. There we were in our tiny first apartment, grinning despite having furniture that consisted of milk crates and a card table. Robert in his work clothes, coming home covered in sawdust from the construction job that would eventually grow into his own successful contracting business. Me in my nursing uniform, exhausted but proud after 12-hour shifts at the county hospital. We'd been so happy with so little. We'd built everything ourselves, paycheck by paycheck, dream by dream. No one had handed us $80,000. No one had quietly covered our bills when we came up short. We'd eaten ramen noodles for months to save for our first house down payment, and we'd been grateful for every sacrifice because it was ours. Deeper in the box, I found the photos that stopped my breath. David's wedding day, but not the ceremony photos everyone always looked at. These were the getting ready photos, the private moments before the public celebration. There was Ashley in her slip and curlers, crying in my arms. I'm so scared, Margaret. What if I'm not good enough for him? What if I mess this up like my mom messed up with my dad? I'd held her like my own daughter, stroking her hair. Sweetheart, you're going to be a wonderful wife. David is lucky to have you. I never had a real mother figure, she'd whispered. Will you be that for me? Will you teach me how to be a good wife, a good mother someday? For as long as you'll have me, I'd promised. The next photo showed me fastening her necklace, the delicate pearl strand that had been my mother's, then mine, now Ashley's. Something old, I'd said, and she'd turned to hug me so fiercely I'd worried about wrinkling her dress. I want to be just like you when I'm older, she'd said. Strong and the kind of mother who makes everything better. I traced my finger over that young woman's face, trying to reconcile her with the person who'd called me a witch 3 days ago. When had my strength become stubbornness? When had my kindness become intrusion? When had being the kind of mother who makes everything better become a burden to be discarded? The next box held Katie's baby photos. My hands trembled as I pulled out the hospital pictures from the day she was born. David pacing the waiting room, his face pale with first-time father anxiety. Ashley exhausted but radiant after 18 hours of labor. And me, holding my hours-old granddaughter while Ashley slept, tears streaming down my face as I counted tiny fingers and toes. She looks like David when he was born. I'd whispered to Robert's photo on my phone. Same little nose, same stubborn chin. But it was the next photo that shattered me completely. Ashley awake and alert despite her exhaustion, reaching for my hand. Margaret, I need to ask you something important. Anything, sweetheart. If something happens to me and David, will you take care of her? Will you make sure she knows she's loved? I'd squeezed her hand, this young woman who'd become the daughter I'd never had. Nothing's going to happen to you, but yes, always. She'll always have me. I mean it, Ashley had insisted. You're the strongest woman I know. If Katie grows up to be half the woman you are, she'll be extraordinary. Now, I'd kissed Ashley's forehead then, overwhelmed with love for this girl who'd married my son and given me the granddaughter I'd never dared hope for. She's going to be perfect, sweetheart. Look at her parents. Now I stared at that photo and wondered, had Ashley meant any of it? Or had even that moment, even that sacred promise, been part of an elaborate performance designed to secure my financial support? The final box contained the house photos, not just the closing day pictures, but all the photos from the renovation process. There I was, paintbrush in hand, helping them transform their new house into a home. David and I installing crown molding in the living room. Ashley and me selecting tile for the kitchen backsplash, laughing over samples spread across their dining room table. I want it to feel like your house too, Mom, Ashley had said, holding up 2 different shades of blue. You're here so much, it should reflect your taste too. There was the photo of me teaching Ashley how to plant the rose garden along their front walkway. Her hands dirty, her face flushed with effort and joy. I never had a mother who knew about gardening, she'd said. I never had a mother who knew about anything domestic, really. You're teaching me how to make a real home. I'd felt so needed, so valuable, so essential to their happiness. There was Katie's first birthday party in their backyard, the garden I'd helped plant in full bloom behind her high chair. Ashley had asked me to make the cake. You're the only one who knows how to make it perfect, she'd said. Katie's face covered in chocolate frosting, her little hands clapping with delight as we sang to her. Best first birthday ever, David had said, his arm around my shoulders. Thanks for making everything special, Mom. I'd lived for those moments. I'd structured my entire existence around creating more of them. But looking at the photos now, I began to notice things I'd missed at the time. How Ashley's smiles sometimes looked strained, how David often seemed caught between his wife and his mother, trying to keep everyone happy. How gradually, over 3 years, I'd become less of a welcomed guest and more of a permanent fixture they couldn't figure out how to move. I'd been so focused on being needed that I'd never asked if my help was actually wanted. I'd been so busy making myself indispensable that I'd never considered whether my presence had become suffocating rather than supportive. The truth was settling in my chest like a stone. They hadn't suddenly become ungrateful. I had gradually become unbearable. But that still didn't excuse what Ashley had said. It didn't justify the cruelty of her words or the casual way she'd planned my exclusion. There was a difference between needing space and calling someone a witch. There was a difference between establishing boundaries and celebrating someone's future exile to a nursing home. I spent the rest of Monday going through my financial records with the clarity of someone who'd finally removed rose-colored glasses. The numbers were staggering. Beyond the $80,000 down payment and the $43,000 in mortgage assistance, there were countless other expenses I'd absorbed without thinking. Katie's private preschool tuition, $18,000 over 2 years. The kitchen renovation when their cheap appliances broke down, $12,000. Ashley's dental hygienist certification program, $8,000. Christmas and birthday gifts that averaged $2,000 annually, $6,000 total. Emergency car repairs, medical bills not covered by insurance, furniture for Katie's room, family vacations. I'd funded so Katie could make memories with her parents. The list went on and on. I calculated the total 3 times, certain I'd made an error, but the number remained the same, $173,000 over 3 years, nearly $60,000 per year, more than many people's entire annual salary. I'd been funding a lifestyle they couldn't afford, enabling financial irresponsibility and calling it love. I'd been buying affection without realizing it, and now that the credit card of my emotions had been maxed out, I was finally seeing the true cost. My phone buzzed, a text from David. Mom tried calling, but it went to voicemail. Everything okay? Ashley made your favorite pot roast for dinner tonight if you want to come over. I stared at the message for a long time. My favorite pot roast. The recipe I'd taught Ashley during our first month as a family. The meal I'd cooked for David throughout his childhood whenever he was sick or sad or celebrating something special. 3 days after calling me a witch, Ashley was making my pot roast recipe and extending an invitation like nothing had happened. Like Mother's Day had been a minor misunderstanding rather than a calculated humiliation. I typed and deleted a dozen responses. Finally, I settled on, "Thank you, but I have other plans tonight." The response came immediately. "Tomorrow, then? Katie misses you." Katie misses you. The one weapon they knew would cut deepest, the one guilt I couldn't fully armor myself against. My granddaughter, innocent of her parents' manipulation, genuinely missing her grandmother who'd vanished from her routine without explanation. I put the phone down without responding and continued my financial archaeology. In my desk drawer, I found the folder of documents from their house purchase. The mortgage papers, the inspection reports, the deed with all our names listed, David Wilson, Ashley Wilson, and Margaret Wilson, as co-signer. I'd forgotten about that detail. They couldn't have qualified for the loan without my excellent credit score and steady income. I wasn't just a grandmother who'd helped with the down payment. I was legally responsible for their mortgage. If they defaulted, the bank would come after me. My house, my retirement savings, my financial security, all of it was tied to their ability to make payments they'd never been able to afford without my monthly supplements. I'd thought I was being generous. In reality, I'd been signing my own financial death warrant. Tuesday morning brought the call I'd been expecting. David's number appeared on my phone at 9:23 a.m., exactly the time he'd be discovering that their mortgage payment had bounced. "Mom?" His voice was tight with panic. "Something's wrong with our mortgage payment. The bank called and said there were insufficient funds, but we had the money in the account yesterday." "That's unfortunate," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. "But didn't you make the transfer like always?" The question hung in the air between us. He'd known. Of course he'd known. You don't receive an extra $1,200 monthly for 3 years without noticing. You don't suddenly have mortgage money appear without understanding where it comes from. I canceled the automatic transfer, David. Silence, then. "Why would you do that?" "Because I'm apparently not immediate family. Because I'm a witch who belongs in a nursing home. Because it's time for you and Ashley to learn what it costs to live the life you've been living." "Mom, I don't know what Ashley said, but she said exactly what she meant, David. And now you know exactly what I mean." "We could lose the house." The desperation in his voice should have moved me. 3 days ago, it would have sent me racing to the bank to fix everything. But now, it just sounded like a child who'd broken his toy and expected someone else to buy him a new one. "Then you'd better figure out how to make your payments," I said. "Like every other adult in America. Mom, please, we'll pay you back. We'll work out a payment plan. Katie could lose her home." Katie, always Katie. The one card they knew I couldn't ignore, the one guilt that could make me fold my hand no matter how strong it was. Katie won't lose her home if her parents act like responsible adults and figure out their finances. This isn't about Katie. This is about you and Ashley learning that actions have consequences. I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking not with regret, but with the terrifying freedom of finally speaking truth to people who'd been taking advantage of my love. An hour later, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see Ashley standing on my porch, her face red from crying, Katie's hand clutched in hers. I opened the door, but didn't invite them in. "Margaret, please." Ashley's voice was thick with tears. "I was wrong. I was stressed and said things I didn't mean. But we can't lose our house. Katie can't lose her room, her school, her friends." Katie looked up at me with confused 7-year-old eyes. "Grandma, Mommy says we might have to move away. I don't want to move away from you." My heart cracked, but I kept my voice steady. Sometimes people have to move when they can't afford where they're living, sweetheart. It's not your fault. But why can't you help us like you always do? Katie's lower lip trembled. Did I do something bad? I knelt down to her level, this child I loved more than my own life, this innocent victim of her parents' financial irresponsibility and emotional manipulation. You did nothing wrong, Katie. You are perfect and wonderful, and I love you more than all the stars in the sky. But sometimes, grown-ups have to solve their own problems. What about family loyalty? Ashley's voice cracked. What about everything we've been to each other? I stood up slowly, looking at this woman I'd loved like a daughter, this woman who'd promised to be the daughter I'd never had, this woman who'd called me a witch 3 days ago. I've been wondering the same thing, Ashley. For 3 years, I've been loyal. I've been generous. I've been loving. I've been present. I've been financially supportive beyond any reasonable expectation. What have you been? I've been grateful. You've been dependent. There's a difference. Ashley's tears were flowing freely now. I know I said horrible things. I was angry and frustrated and took it out on you. But we're family, Margaret. Families forgive each other. Families also respect each other. They include each other. They don't plan each other's exile over phone calls. It was one bad day, one stupid comment. You're going to destroy our lives over one mistake? I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who still didn't understand that calling someone a witch wasn't a mistake. It was a revelation. It was the truth finally spoken out loud after years of being thought but never said. I'm not destroying anything, Ashley. I'm just not building it anymore. There's a difference. 3 months later, I drove past their house on my way to Katie's school. The for sale sign stood crooked in the front yard, the rose garden I'd helped plant overgrown with weeds. Moving boxes were stacked on the porch, and Ashley was loading them into a U-Haul truck, her face drawn and older than her 32 years. Katie spotted me from the front window and waved frantically. I waved back, my heart breaking for this little girl who was paying the price for her parents' choices. But I didn't stop. I didn't offer to help. I didn't reach for my checkbook to solve their problems one more time. Instead, I drove to the senior community center where I'd started volunteering, teaching knitting to women my age, who'd also learned the hard way that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's enablement, dressed up in pretty paper. "Margaret!" called out Dolores, a 75-year-old former teacher who'd spent 40 years bailing her gambling-addicted son out of debt before finally saying enough. "How are you feeling about your decision?" "Stronger every day," I said, and meant it. My phone buzzed with another text from David. I glanced at it, then placed the phone face down on the table. Whatever crisis needed solving, whatever guilt trip needed taking, whatever emergency required my immediate financial intervention, it could wait. For the first time in 3 years, my calendar belonged to me. My bank account belonged to me. My emotions belonged to me. I was 73 years old, and I was finally learning what it felt like to live for myself instead of living for the gratitude of people who'd forgotten how to be grateful. The knitting needles clicked rhythmically in my hands as I worked on a baby blanket for Dolores's new great-grandson, a gift freely given to people who appreciated rather than expected it. Around me, women who'd learned similar lessons shared similar stories, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. 2 weeks later, I encountered them at the grocery store. I was comparing prices on coffee, a habit I'd developed now that I was living on a fixed income again, when I heard a familiar voice calling my name. "Grandma!" Katie launched herself at my legs with the force of a small hurricane, her arms wrapping around my waist like she'd never let go. I dropped my coffee comparison and hugged her back, breathing in her shampoo scent and feeling my carefully constructed emotional walls crumble just a little. "I missed you so much." Katie's voice was muffled against my sweater. "Why don't you come see me anymore?" "I missed you too, sweetheart." I smoothed her hair, noting that it was longer, less carefully styled than when Ashley had more time and money for regular salon visits. Ashley appeared at the end of the aisle, pushing a cart filled with generic brands and marked-down items. She looked tired, older, wearing clothes I'd seen her in many times before. The wardrobe of someone who'd learned to make things last. "Katie, come back here," Ashley called, but her voice lacked its usual authority. Katie didn't move from my arms. "Grandma, are you still mad at us?" "I was never mad at you, baby girl. Not ever. But you were mad at Mommy and Daddy?" I looked over Katie's head at Ashley, who stood frozen by her cart, her face a mixture of hope and resignation. She looked like someone who'd learned hard lessons about consequences, about the difference between want and need, about what really matters when everything else gets stripped away. "Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements," I told Katie carefully, "but that doesn't change how much I love you. Do you love Mommy too?" The question every child asks when their world feels uncertain, when the adults who are supposed to make everything safe and stable start acting unpredictably. Katie needed to know that love could survive disappointment, that families could weather storms, that she wasn't responsible for the emotional distance between the adults in her life. "I love your mommy very much," I said truthfully, "but sometimes loving someone means letting them learn to take care of themselves." Ashley stepped closer, her voice quiet. "Margaret, we're moving to my mother's in Tennessee. The house, we couldn't save it." I nodded, unsurprised. "I'm sorry Katie has to leave her friends." "I don't want to move." Katie looked up at me with desperate eyes. "Can't I live with you instead? Can't we all live together like we used to?" The plea I'd been dreading, the one I'd known was coming, the one that would test every boundary I'd worked so hard to establish. Katie, innocent of her parents' manipulations, offering the simple solution that love should conquer all obstacles. "That's not how it works, sweetheart. Children live with their parents, and parents take care of children. That's the way families work." "But you took care of us," Katie said, confused. "You helped with everything." "I helped too much," I said gently. "And sometimes when you help too much, people forget how to help themselves." Ashley's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't argue. She didn't make excuses or promises or desperate pleas. She just stood there accepting responsibility for the first time since I'd known her. "We leave next week," Ashley said finally. "I wanted Katie to say goodbye." I hugged my granddaughter tighter, memorizing the feel of her small body against mine, the sound of her breathing, the weight of her head on my shoulder. This might be the last time I held her for months, maybe years. The price of teaching lessons was sometimes losing access to the people you loved most. "I want you to know something, Katie," I said, pulling back to look at her face. "You are smart and beautiful and kind and strong. No matter where you live, no matter what happens, you are loved. And when you're older, when you understand things better, I hope you'll call me. I hope you'll visit. I hope you'll know that there's always a place for you in my heart. I'll call you every day. Your parents will decide about phone calls, but I want you to remember that I love you, okay? Even if we don't see each other for a while, that never changes." Ashley cleared her throat. "Margaret, I need you to know I'm sorry. Not because we lost the house, not because we need help, but because I was wrong about what you meant to our family. I was wrong about what you deserved from us." I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who'd been my daughter-in-law for 8 years, my friend for longer than that, my disappointment for the past few months. "I hope you learn to stand on your own, Ashley. I hope you discover how strong you are when you're not waiting for someone else to solve your problems. I hope Tennessee gives you a fresh start. Can you forgive me?" Forgiveness. The question that assumed the right to absolution, the expectation that love should erase consequences, that saying sorry should restore privileges that had been lost through poor choices. "I forgive you," I said, because it was true. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean going back to the way things were. It means hoping you become the person you're capable of being. Katie hugged me one final time, fierce and desperate. I love you, Grandma. I'll be good so you won't be mad anymore. You are good, sweetheart. You've always been good. This was never about you. I watched them walk away, Ashley's hand on Katie's shoulder, the cart full of store brands and careful choices rolling between them. At the end of the aisle, Katie turned back and waved, her little face solemn and sad and trying to be brave. I waved back, then finished my coffee shopping with tears running down my cheeks and something that felt surprisingly like peace settling in my chest. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is letting them face the consequences of their choices. Sometimes love means stepping back instead of stepping in. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is refuse to be the solution to problems other people need to solve for themselves. I'd spent 3 years teaching them that Margaret Wilson would always be there to catch them when they fell. Now they were learning to catch themselves. And I was learning that a life built around other people's needs wasn't really a life at all. It was just an elaborate performance of worthiness, a desperate attempt to purchase love with money and services and endless availability. I was 73 years old, and for the first time in decades, I was learning how to live for an audience of one.